In this video, we are not only going to see some prized figures in a General's toy soldier collection, but also hear some great anecdotes about how he acquired some of his figures.
That particular model of Britain's Bren gun carrier was under the Christmas tree at my house in 1946. I was 6 or 7 when I started. Along with the Bren gun carrier were a number of other Britain sets, Highlanders and Grenadiers. And that got me interested in the hobby. The Bren gun carrier is something that I've always held on to because it was the first thing I ever remember seeing with regards to a Britain's model. Now, at that time in 46, I really knew nothing about Britons or anything about toy soldiers. And that came over years of starting to collect. To me, that Bren gun carrier I knew was from the Second World War, and I knew about the Second World War because I was born during the Second World War. And then to get a ride in one, I knew where I wanted to go with that. I knew all about the Second World War, so you had to have enemies, you had to have friendlies, you had to have artillery and all that kind of thing. And Britain supplied it all to a young lad who went and got a newspaper route so he had more money to buy more.
No.
When I think of what I was paying when I started at 60 cents a box. So I wasn't into painting them or putting them together. I was buying the commercial boxes. But there are a lot of people that like to assemble their own and paint their own. I didn't. I just wanted to buy the figures. I wanted the battlefields. I wanted the Beau Geste fort with the Arabs attacking and the Foreign Legion hemmed in, and the Irish Fusiliers all lined up type of thing, and the Grenadier Guards marching out of Buckingham Palace. There was a store downtown in Vancouver, and it was called Miller and Co. It was a china shop. But I got in there talking to a lady, and she said, "Oh, we have some of those soldiers upstairs. We don't sell many of them, but I'll take you up and show them to you." So that was it. Whatever I wanted, she would order for me. I started a real eclectic collection. And so one of the things I built was a fort. I had a whole bunch of Foreign Legion soldiers, and then the Arabs came out, and I bought a bunch of them. And
so the next item we'd like you to talk about is the Britain's 40 millimeter anti-aircraft gun and crew.
Oh yes, now we're going to go back to the Irish Fusiliers again, because when I joined cadets, one of the things that I noticed was there were half a dozen 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns on the armory's floor. So once I'd completed my recruit training, we were given options of either going into the anti-aircraft troop, the communications group, or the driver mechanics group, where you learn to drive or communicate or work the guns. Well, where did I want to go? Let's go work the guns. So I guess I was 13 at the time. We went over to Victoria, and there was an artillery range over there, and there was a regular force regiment called First Light Anti-Aircraft. And we would go over, and believe it or not, 13 and 14-year-old kids were firing these 40 millimeter Boffer guns. If the Air Force used to go up with a plane, and they would haul a thing called a drogue, which was like a great big huge wing. And the whole idea, and there was a lot of distance between the drogue and the aircraft, I can assure you. But we would fire at this drogue. And if that pilot knew what was down below him and was firing live ammunition up, I think he'd have made the extension to the drogue a heck of a lot longer. But anyway, that's what got me started into buying Britain's guns. And I have a large collection of lineal and elastoline figures. Why? Because I served 12 years in Europe. And so I would go to little villages and look for, they would have these markets, home markets, where people would come out and take out stuff out of their house that they wanted to sell or trade or whatever. So I would go to these little villages up in the mountainsides, and when you would see them advertised in the newspaper, and spend a Saturday up there driving from town to town. And I'd look for women that would be kind of old enough to be mothers during the war. And so in my horrible German, I would go and ask them if they had Kriegsspielzeuge or war toys. And invariably they would, and they would have them in a box under their table covered with a newspaper, because a lot of them had swastikas on them. And they weren't allowed to have these things, certainly not with swastikas. So I would look at them and say, okay, yes, I'll take the batch. And they were happy to get rid of them, mainly because by German law, they weren't supposed to have anything with swastika on it. So that gave me an inroad into collecting those particular figures. They're bigger, they're 60 millimeter figures by comparison to 54. But I found them interesting things, and it was a fun way to spend a weekend touring around and seeing the countryside and finding these types of things. Now, I invited the Russian army attaché to dinner one night along with another group of people. But anyway, he got wandering around and he went into my den in the apartment we were living in, and he said, came out and he cornered me and he said, "You've got all those figures in there, but I don't see any Russian figures." I said, "No, I don't. I haven't picked up any while I'm here." He said, "You tell your in Moscow to go to the Stalingrad tube station. There's a toy soldier shop there, and there will be 3 packages waiting for him. That is my gift to you for dinner." There we go. Army, Navy, and Air Force. Three sets of them.
The next piece we're going to ask you about is Britain's Queen's Birthday Centenary.
Right. While I was stationed in London, it was a centenary of Britain's. There was a dinner held in the Guards Museum. That is the Grenadier Guards Museum in London. It was fairly limited in attendees. I think 75 was about the total, just because of the space available. Dennis Britton was present at the dinner, and I had a great opportunity to sit down and talk with him. So in that picture, you will see Queen Elizabeth with all her bits and pieces for the coronation, and each attendee at the dinner received this special production. So there were only 75 of them made, and then the mold was broken. So I was fortunate enough to be invited to the dinner, attend with friends of mine, and received one of these lovely memoirs of an evening out with a whole bunch of toy soldier collectors and Dennis Britton, about a block and a half from the Canadian High Commission in London, when it was in Sloane Square. Not Sloane Square, sorry. When it was in downtown London, I could walk down to Tradition, and every day or every second day I was down there, and then I'd have to sneak these boxes home. and hide them. Now, this particular fellow, the Guards drum major in state dress, was in a box, and right on the top of a pile of menial soldiers and guns and tanks. And I found this particular box over in Victoria, British Columbia, and the fellow was going on holidays, and he had inherited these from somebody in his family, and he needed money for drinks, as he told me, on this cruise he was going on, which was a two-week cruise. And he said, I need some money, and I need some money for drinks. And I said, okay, fine. Now I understand where you're coming from. Okay, can I have a look at that? And he said, yes. Anyway, I moved the drum major aside, and scattered in amongst all the German soldiers was a complete band of the Grenadier Guards and 18 marching figures, including a color bearer and officers. And then underneath that was this great jumble of German soldiers, political figures, and underneath all of that were a Gamma tank, a scout car. These were all German toys, war toys. Anyway, we made a deal. I got a good deal, I'll tell you. and he probably drank himself into oblivion some days, but it was a good deal, and that's where that drum major comes from. So every time I look at him, I think about this trip over to Victoria. You find these things in the greatest places, and mostly now, they've been in somebody's attic or basement or wherever, and the parents or the grandparents just want to get rid of this stuff. And you'll find it in some of the strangest places. Church sales and things like that. You just have to look around. And that's the joy of it, looking around and then finding something. You don't find them every weekend or every month, but the joy of just going out and eventually finding these things is what makes collecting so neat. I'm 82 years old. My wife keeps saying to me, I hope you know what's going to happen with all that collection, because I don't know anything about it, and I don't know how to dispose of it. What goes in what box? I have no idea. So you better get your plans in order.